You are an expensive burden to this company, Liam. My name is Liam Anderson. I am 47 years old, and I have led the sales team at Morgan Industries for 16 years. I built relationships with every major client from scratch. I worked weekends, missed family dinners, and turned Morgan Industries into a respected name in the Chicago industrial sector. You are listening to a powerful story of revenge. If you enjoy tales like this, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. It truly helps our work. Nicholas Harrison, my boss, said those words as he leaned back in his leather chair. The smile on his face told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about results. It was about numbers on a spreadsheet. 3 interns could do your job, he added, adjusting his tie as if he had just solved world hunger. I sat there looking at the man who had been riding my coattails for the last 3 years. Nicholas had joined Morgan as Chief Operating Officer when the previous one retired. He arrived with his MBA and sleek theories about efficiency. He started questioning everything the moment he felt comfortable. The irony was not lost on me. While he talked about cutting costs, I was responsible for bringing in 60% of the company's revenue. My client relationships were the backbone of this business. But Nicholas saw dollar signs where I saw handshakes and trust built over decades. I understand, I said calmly. Good, security will escort you out. Your access cards have already been deactivated. I nodded and stood up. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked to my office and put my personal items into a cardboard box. The photo of my wife and kids, my coffee mug from the Construction Equipment Expo in Milwaukee, the paperweight my daughter made in the 3rd grade. My team watched from their cubicles as security escorted me to the elevator. Jenna, my assistant, had tears in her eyes. She had been with me for 8 years. She knew every client's birthday, their kids' names, their favorite restaurants. We had built something real here. As the elevator descended, I thought about the conversation I'd overheard last week. Nicholas, talking to someone on the phone about trimming the fat and maximizing profit margins. He had mentioned my salary specifically, said the company could hire 3 recent graduates for what they paid me. What Nicholas didn't understand was that those 3 recent graduates would inherit client lists, not relationships. There's a difference between a name in a database and a man who calls you personally when your business needs help. The elevator reached the ground floor. I walked through the lobby I had entered every morning for 16 years, carrying my box of memories. Nicholas thought he had made a brilliant business decision. He had no idea what he had just set in motion. I started at Morgan Industries right after college. Back then, it was a small operation run by Thomas Morgan himself. 20 employees, 2 salespeople, and a dream of competing with the big manufacturers. Thomas believed in relationships. Sell to the person, not the company, he always said. When Thomas retired 5 years ago, his son-in-law took over as CEO. That's when Nicholas joined the team. New management meant new ideas about efficiency and cost-cutting. The company had grown to 300 employees, but somehow the soul of the place began to disappear. My client base wasn't built overnight. Henry James of Pinnacle Construction trusted me because I had driven to his construction site at midnight when his equipment broke down during a crucial project. Patricia Wells of Westmont Enterprises kept Morgan on her preferred supplier list because I remembered her daughter's graduation and sent flowers. They weren't transactions. They were relationships. Over the years, I noticed subtle changes in how Nicholas interacted with the sales team. He started questioning my travel expenses. He asked why I needed to take clients to dinner when email communication should be sufficient. He suggested we could service accounts remotely instead of in-person meetings. The personal touch is outdated, he said during one team meeting. Modern business is about efficiency and digital communication. I tried to explain that construction executives were old-school people who preferred handshakes to email signatures, that when Patricia Wells had a $10 million project, she called me personally because she trusted my judgment. But Nicholas saw those dinner receipts as unnecessary expenses. The warning signs had been there for months. Nicholas started scheduling meetings without me. He brought in a consultant to analyze sales processes. He asked Jenna to provide detailed reports on my daily activities. He was building a case. What really bothered me was how he treated the rest of the team, Charles, who had been with Morgan for 12 years, was passed over for a promotion because Nicholas thought his salary was above the market rate. Maria, our best account manager, lost her biggest client when Nicholas insisted she handle their concerns through the customer service portal instead of personal calls. The company culture was changing. Thomas Morgan used to walk the floor, knew everyone's name, asked about their families. Nicholas managed from his corner office through spreadsheets and metrics. He measured everything except the things that truly mattered. My wife had noticed the stress. "You're different when you come home," she said last month, "like you're fighting a battle you can't win." She was right. I was fighting to preserve something Nicholas didn't value. Customer loyalty can't be measured in quarterly reports, but it's the foundation everything else is built on. Nicholas was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The call came at 8 p.m. Patricia Wells from Westmont Enterprises. "Liam, I just heard the news." "Is it true?" News traveled fast in the Chicago construction sector. Morgan Industries had been my professional identity for 16 years, but apparently I was Liam Anderson first, Morgan employee second. "It's true, Patricia. As of this afternoon, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You built half their business relationships. What is Nicholas thinking?" I was sitting in my truck outside a coffee shop, still processing the day's events. "He thinks 3 interns can handle the sales department." Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3 interns? "Liam, you know my business better than I do sometimes. No intern is going to understand that when I say I need something urgent, it means yesterday, not next week. Or that my bidding process is different for public versus private projects." I sighed, looking out the window at the late evening Chicago sky. Apparently, those things don't matter as much as cutting 30% from the sales department's expenses. "Well, they just lost Westmont as a client," Patricia stated firmly. "I'm not dealing with some rookie who doesn't understand how I work. Do you have plans?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't gotten that far in my head yet. Honestly, no. This all just happened today. "Meet me for coffee tomorrow," she said. "I have some ideas I want to discuss with you." And Liam, Morgan just made their biggest mistake. I ended the call and sat in silence for a few minutes. My phone rang again. It was Henry James from Pinnacle Construction. "Liam, is it true what I'm hearing?" "Morgan let you go?" News really did travel fast. "Liam, is it true what I'm hearing? Morgan let you go?" News really did travel fast. I took a deep breath before answering Henry James, owner of Pinnacle Construction and one of my oldest clients. "Yes, Henry, it happened this afternoon." There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a muffled curse. "That is complete nonsense. You're the reason we've kept Morgan as our primary supplier all these years." "Apparently, the company's new vision doesn't value that kind of relationship," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Nicholas believes technology can replace personal contact." "Technology?" Henry laughed humorlessly. "No app is going to call me at 3 a.m. when a piece of equipment fails in the middle of a critical concrete pour. No automated system is going to understand why we need specific parts that aren't in the standard catalog." I smiled slightly, despite the situation. Henry was always direct. "Look, Liam, I won't beat around the bush. Pinnacle is about to start 3 major projects next quarter. We were counting on Morgan because of you. Now we need to rethink that decision. I understand completely. Do you have plans?" he asked, echoing Patricia's question. "Because if you're considering options, I want you to know that Pinnacle values people who understand what real partnership means." "I'm actually meeting with Patricia Wells tomorrow," I admitted. She mentioned she had some ideas. "Good, call me afterward. I want to be part of that conversation." And Liam, I'm sorry about what happened today, but I have a feeling this might be the start of something bigger for you. After hanging up, I sat in my truck for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. In less than 3 hours since my firing, 2 of Morgan's biggest clients had expressed not just solidarity, but an interest in continuing to work with me, regardless of where I was. I drove home with my mind spinning. When I arrived, Laura, my wife of 20 years, was waiting on the porch. She knew. Somehow she always knew. "It happened, didn't it?" she asked as I walked up the steps with my box of belongings. I nodded, putting the box down to hug her. "How did you know?" "I'll never come home at 6 p.m., she smiled gently. And you've been talking about this happening for months. We went inside together. Our children, Megan, 19, away at college, and Julian, 16, were at their activities. The house was unusually quiet. How are you feeling? Laura asked, pouring me a cup of coffee in the kitchen. I thought for a moment. Strangely so relieved. Her eyes widened slightly. Relieved? Yes, I confirmed, surprised by my own answer. For the last few months, going to work felt like walking into a house I didn't recognize anymore. The essence of what we did was being lost, and I was fighting a lonely battle to preserve it. Laura took my hand across the table. You did everything you could. Liam, some battles just can't be won. But maybe this wasn't a battle to be won, I reflected. Maybe it was a door closing so another one could open. I told her about the calls from Patricia and Henry, the meeting set for the next day. Laura listened intently, her eyes growing brighter. You realize what's happening, don't you? She asked when I finished. What do you mean? Liam, you built something far more valuable than a sales department. You built a network of people who trust you, not Morgan Industries. The company was just the vehicle for what you truly offered. Trust, knowledge, and genuine relationships. Her words resonated deeply. For the first time since I walked out of Nicholas's office with my box, I started to see a path forward, not just an interrupted past. My cell phone rang again. It was Rebecca Cole, a former colleague who had left Morgan 2 years prior to become a director at Corvix Manufacturing, a smaller but growing competitor. Liam, I just heard. We need to talk. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? I explained I already had a meeting with Patricia in the morning. Then lunch, she insisted. This can't wait. The phone didn't stop ringing that night. Charles from the sales team, Maria from account management, Jenna, my assistant, openly crying on the phone, all with the same message. Nicholas's decision was a monumental mistake, all asking about my future plans. The next day, I met Patricia Wells at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. The 55-year-old executive, known for her direct approach and sharp intellect, was already there when I arrived, tapping away at her tablet. Liam, she stood to greet me with a hug, a rare gesture from her. You look good for someone who got canned yesterday. I smiled as we sat down. I'm discovering that maybe I wasn't as canned as Nicholas imagined. Patricia smirked, a calculated smile I recognized from countless negotiations. That's exactly why we're here. Let's get straight to the point. Vestment has 4 major projects slated for this year, totaling over 80 million in construction. That translates to roughly 15 million in industrial equipment and supplies. She slid the tablet toward me, showing a detailed spreadsheet. Those contracts were earmarked for Morgan. Now, they're available. Patricia, I appreciate your loyalty, but I don't represent any company right now. Not yet, she corrected, leaning back. I spoke with Henry from Pinnacle this morning. He has similar numbers to share. Together, we represent about 25 million in business that Morgan just lost without even realizing it. My phone buzzed. A text from Henry. I'm 5 minutes out. I have news. What exactly are you proposing? I asked Patricia. Chicago has several industrial equipment manufacturers. Morgan is the biggest, but not the only one. Some are smaller, more agile, more willing to innovate, and desperate for someone with your experience and contacts. Before I could answer, Henry arrived, bringing his characteristic energy with him. He sat down with us unceremoniously. Well, we're all here. Let's get to it, he said, smiling. Liam, I called 5 other Morgan clients last night. They all had the same reaction. If you're out, they're reconsidering. Are you suggesting I use my relationships to build something better? Patricia completed. Something founded on the values Thomas Morgan originally established, before people like Nicholas started dismantling them. Henry nodded vigorously. This isn't about stealing clients, Liam. It's about offering them an alternative that values what really matters in our industry. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours. Patricia and Henry weren't just expressing solidarity. They were offering concrete support. Connections to investors, guarantees of initial contracts, a vision for a company that would blend modern technology with the traditional values of relationship and personal service. When I left for my lunch with Rebecca, my mind was buzzing. What had started as the worst day of my career was rapidly turning into a catalyst for something I had never considered, starting my own company. Rebecca was waiting for me at the restaurant, a knowing smile on her face. "Let me guess," she said as I sat down. "You spent the morning with clients who want to keep working with you, not with Morgan." I raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "Because it's exactly what happened to me 2 years ago when Nicholas started his modernization project." She made air quotes. "The difference is, you're much bigger than I was. Half of Morgan's major clients are loyal to you personally, not the brand. And the other half is waiting to see what you do next." She smiled, leaning forward. "And that's why Corvix sent me to talk to you. We want you to join us as Director of Client Relations. Salary 40% higher than at Morgan, profit sharing and freedom to build your team as you see fit." The offer was tempting. Corvix was a respectable company, albeit smaller. "I'm considering a few options," I replied cautiously. Rebecca studied me for a moment. "They suggested you start your own business, didn't they?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I thought about that too," she continued. "But building a company from scratch, even with guaranteed clients, requires capital, infrastructure, a production team. It takes years to get fully established." She paused, letting the words sink in. "At Corvix, you could start servicing your clients immediately. Our infrastructure already exists. Our production has idle capacity. What we're missing is exactly the relationships you bring." The argument was solid. We discussed details for another hour. As we parted ways, Rebecca handed me an envelope. Our formal offer. "Think about it, Liam. And regardless of your decision, know that Nicholas made the biggest mistake of his life yesterday. Chicago is a big city, but the business world is small. The word is already out." I drove home with my head full. In 24 hours, I had gone from fired to fought over. I had a formal offer from Corvix and the backing of 2 major clients to start my own business. When I got home, I found another car parked in the driveway. A BMW I recognized immediately. It belonged to Thomas Morgan, the retired founder of the company that bore his name. The 72-year-old man was sitting in my living room with Laura, sipping coffee. "Ah, Liam," he stood to embrace me. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday. And about what happens tomorrow." Thomas Morgan was an imposing figure even at 72. Perfectly trimmed white hair, an upright posture, and eyes that seemed to see past appearances. He had built Morgan Industries from nothing, transforming it from a small workshop into one of the largest industrial equipment manufacturers in the Midwest. "Liam, my boy," he said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "I heard what happened. A disgrace." "Mr. Morgan, it's good to see you," I replied honestly. "I wasn't expecting your visit. How could I stay away when I heard Nicholas fired my best salesman, the man who built half the company's relationships?" Laura offered fresh coffee and left us alone in the living room. Thomas sat down heavily on the sofa, sighing. "When I retired and left the company in my son-in-law's hands, I thought I was doing the right thing," he began. "Paul was always a good administrator, but he doesn't understand the heart of the business like I do. And then he brought in this Nicholas fellow." Thomas shook his head, clearly disappointed. "I didn't come here to badmouth the current management, though I could. I came because I heard rumors. Chicago is small when it comes to business, Liam. People talk. And what they're saying is that Corvix is courting you, and that Patricia Wells and Henry James are proposing you start your own business." I was surprised by the accuracy of his information. "The rumors are correct," I admitted. "I'm still weighing my options." Thomas nodded slowly. "Can I ask you a personal question, Liam? In your 16 years at Morgan, what part of the job gave you the most fulfillment?" The question caught me off guard, but the answer came easily. Building something. Watching relationships grow from an initial handshake to decades-long partnerships. Solving real problems for real people. Being part of my clients' success stories. A slow smile spread across Thomas's wrinkled face. Exactly how I felt. It's why I built Morgan. Not for the profits, though they came as a consequence, but for the satisfaction of creating something that makes a real difference. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Corvix will offer a good salary, no doubt. But you'll just be an employee implementing someone else's vision. Starting your own company. That's terrifying, risky, and will consume every minute of your time for the next few years. It sounds like you have a third option in mind," I commented, beginning to understand why he was here. Perceptive as always. Thomas smiled. Yes, I do. When I sold the company to my son-in-law, I kept a few side investments. One of them is TM Equipment. I frowned, confused. I've never heard of it. Because it only exists on paper, Thomas explained. A registered company with licenses in order, bank accounts, even a small industrial warehouse in Gary, Indiana. But no active operations. A sort of retirement project I never got around to. My heart began to race as I understood where the conversation was going. Are you suggesting I'm offering a partnership, Liam? He interrupted, eyes shining. 50-50. You bring the relationships, the energy, and the vision. I bring the initial infrastructure, working capital for the first 18 months, and 5 decades of experience as an advisor. We would build something together, something that honors the values Morgan used to stand for. The proposal was unexpected, and at the same time felt perfectly logical. Thomas Morgan, the man who had taught me everything about industrial sales, offering a partnership at the exact moment I was at a crossroads. There's one important detail, Thomas added. Legally, I can't compete directly with Morgan. The sales contract has specific clauses, but you have no such restrictions, and TM Equipment technically belongs to a family trust, not directly to me. A convenient technicality, I observed. The business world is made of technicalities, my boy. He smiled. What do you say? My mind was racing. The proposal solved many of the problems Rebecca had pointed out. Initial capital, infrastructure, time to establish, and it offered something Corvix couldn't. Real ownership, building something of my own, our own. I need time to think, I answered honestly. And to talk with Laura. Naturally, Thomas agreed, standing up. Take the time you need, but not too long. Opportunities like this have short windows. After Thomas left, I sat with Laura on the porch and shared all the options. She listened attentively, as she always did in critical moments. What does your gut say? She asked simply when I finished. That working with Thomas Morgan would be a privilege. That building something of our own would be more fulfilling than any corporate title. But also that it would be the hardest path. Laura took my hand. Ever since we met, you've never chosen the easy path, Liam. It's why your clients trust you. It's why we've been together for 23 years. You always choose the path you believe is right, not the most convenient one. Her support meant everything. That night I slept better than I had in weeks, despite the uncertainties ahead. The next morning my phone rang early. It was Jenna, my former assistant at Morgan. Liam, you're not going to believe this. Her voice was tense, almost whispering. It's chaos here. Westmont cancelled all pending contracts yesterday afternoon. Pinnacle just sent a formal email suspending all purchases until further notice. Nicholas is furious, stalking the hallways, demanding to know who's in contact with you. What do you mean? He thinks you're actively sabotaging the company, Jenna explained. He can't accept that clients are leaving because of his decision. I sighed. Typical of Nicholas to find a scapegoat instead of taking responsibility. There's more, Jenna continued. He's called an emergency meeting with the entire sales team for this afternoon. The rumor is he's going to reinforce policies against communicating with former employees. Liam? He mentioned lawsuits for interference with company business. He has no grounds for that, I replied, though I felt a chill. Lawsuits, even baseless ones, could disrupt any new venture. I just wanted to warn you, Jenna said. And also, well, I'm sending my resume out. This place isn't the same without you. After the call, I made my decision. I needed to act quickly, before Nicholas could create legal roadblocks. I called Thomas. I'm in, I said simply when he answered. When can we start? Today, Thomas replied without hesitation. Meet me at the address I'm sending you in an hour. Bring a good pen. The TM Equipment warehouse in Gary was smaller than Morgan's facilities, but surprisingly well equipped. Clean, organized, with machinery covered in tarps waiting to be brought to life. Thomas met me at the gate, accompanied by a man in a suit. My lawyer, he explained. The documents are ready. 50-50 partnership, as promised. As soon as we sign, you officially become co-owner. The process was quick and surprisingly emotional. In less than 2 hours, I became a business owner. Thomas shook my hand firmly when the last document was signed. Welcome to the world of ownership, Liam. Now the real work begins. He wasn't exaggerating. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. activating systems, hiring initial staff, organizing the supply chain. Thomas was tireless, his experience shortening processes that would normally take weeks. Patricia Wells was the first to formalize a contract with the new TM equipment, followed closely by Henry James. As promised, they guaranteed enough orders to justify our immediate existence. Others followed as the word spread. A week after my firing, I was in my new office when Rebecca from Corvix called. "You chose the hard path," she commented when I explained my decision, "but maybe the one best suited for you. The Corvix offer still stands if you change your mind." "I appreciate that, Rebecca. Who knows? Maybe in the future our companies can collaborate on a project." "That would be interesting," she replied with a thoughtful tone, "especially given what's happening at Morgan." "What do you mean?" "You haven't heard?" Her surprise was genuine. "Nicholas is implementing a complete restructuring. Sales department being cut in half. Everything digitized, automated. He's calling it Morgan 2.0 internally, a model of efficiency for the 21st century. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. He's doubling down instead of admitting his mistake. Exactly. I called to congratulate you, Liam, but also to warn you. Nicholas is talking openly about you in executive meetings, says you're actively poaching clients, violating some non-compete agreement. "No such agreement exists," I replied. "I checked with lawyers." "He knows that," Rebecca confirmed, "but he's creating a narrative. Be careful. Men like Nicholas are dangerous when they feel cornered." The warning was relevant. In the following days, I started hearing similar reports. Nicholas was painting me as the villain, claiming I had planned this all along, that my firing had been a maneuver to steal Morgan's clients. The irony was palpable. The man who fired me, claiming my role was dispensable, was now accusing me of being too vital to lose. Meanwhile, TM equipment grew rapidly. We hired 5 people in the first week, including Jenna, who resigned from Morgan the moment she heard about my new venture. It was only a matter of time, she explained on her first day. The atmosphere there is toxic. Nicholas has cameras in the departments now, monitors conversations, demands daily activity reports. At the end of the second week, I received an unexpected call. It was Charles, who had remained on the Morgan sales team. "Liam, we need to talk." His voice was tense. "Not on the phone." "Can we meet tonight?" I agreed, intrigued. We met at a discreet bar in the South Loop, far from our usual business circles. "Half the major clients are gone already," Charles began without preamble as we sat down. "Some went to you, others to Corvix. Some just froze orders until they evaluate the market." He took a sip of his beer before continuing. "Nicholas is desperate. He's called a board meeting for tomorrow. The rumor is he's going to propose legal action against you and TM Equipment. He's managed to document some calls between you and former Morgan clients. He's building a case for commercial interference." I felt a knot in my stomach. A lawsuit, even a baseless one, could delay our progress, drain resources, and tarnish our nascent reputation. "Why are you telling me this?" Charles looked at his drink for a long moment. "Because what he's doing is wrong, Liam. The whole company is imploding because of his ego. And because..." He hesitated. "I want to know if you have room for one more salesman." Charles's revelation about Nicholas's plans didn't completely surprise me, but the immediacy of the threat was concerning. A lawsuit, even without merit, could smother our new business before we had a chance to get established. "We always have room for talent, Charles," I replied to his question about joining TM Equipment. "But I need to be transparent. We're just starting. I can't guarantee the same stability as Morgan, at least not yet." Charles gave a tired smile. "Stability? At Morgan? Liam, nobody there feels stable right now. It's like working on quicksand." I made a mental note to discuss bringing Charles onto our team with Thomas. For now, there were more pressing issues. "Do you know exactly what Nicholas plans to present to the board?" Charles leaned forward, lowering his voice. "He has phone records of calls between you and several former Morgan clients in the 48 hours after your firing. He's claiming you breached some kind of confidentiality, that you used proprietary company information to redirect business." "That's ridiculous," I argued. "First, the clients reached out to me, not the other way around. Second, knowledge of contacts isn't confidential information, especially in our market where everyone knows everyone." Charles nodded. "I know that. You know that. But Nicholas is desperate, and the board is scared by the numbers. The projections for the next quarter are terrifying after the client losses. I left that meeting with my mind racing. I drove straight to Thomas's house, who received me in his private study, an elegant room filled with books and mementos from his years in business. When I finished recounting the conversation with Charles, the old businessman was silent for a few moments, fingers steepled under his chin. Predictable, he finally commented. Nicholas always preferred to assign blame rather than accept responsibility. But we have to take the threat seriously. What's our strategy? Thomas smiled, a shrewd glint in his eye. Two fronts, Liam. First, we accelerate our plans. The main warehouse needs to be operational in 72 hours, not 2 weeks as we planned. If we're going to face a legal storm, we need products going out the door to sustain cash. Flo, he stood, walking to a side table where he poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Second, we go on the offensive. Tomorrow morning, our lawyer will send a formal letter to the Morgan board, warning them of the legal consequences of baseless allegations against our company. We will include voluntary affidavits from clients confirming they approached us on their own initiative. I accepted the glass he offered me. Won't that just anger Nicholas more? Certainly, Thomas chuckled softly, but it will also give the board pause. They are businessmen, not crusaders in a holy war. If they see Nicholas is proposing a costly legal battle with limited chances of success, they will hesitate. I took a sip, appreciating the smooth burn of the amber liquid. Is there anything else we should do? Yes, Thomas replied, his eyes locking on mine. Call Rebecca at Corvix. The suggestion caught me by surprise. Rebecca, why? Because 3 players completely changed the dynamic of this game, Thomas explained. Right now, Nicholas is positioning this as Morgan versus you, the traitorous ex-employee. But if Corvix publicly enters the story as your business ally, the narrative shifts. I began to understand his reasoning, from a personal feud to a market reality. Exactly. Thomas nodded, pleased with my understanding. It's no longer about Liam versus Nicholas, but about Morgan facing the reality of a competitive market where clients have options. Much less sympathetic for his argument. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. I called Rebecca that same night, explaining the situation and proposing a strategic partnership. TM would provide specialized components that complemented Corvix's product line, creating a synergy that would benefit both companies. An alliance against Morgan? Rebecca asked, interest clear in her voice. An alliance to better serve the market, I corrected, which incidentally complicates Nicholas's plans. She laughed. I love how you wrap corporate strategy in customer service, Liam. I always admired that about you. Let's talk to our board first thing tomorrow and I'll get back to you by end of day. The next 48 hours were a race against time. While our legal team prepared the preemptive letter to the Morgan board, Thomas and I accelerated the activation of our main warehouse. Employees were hired on an emergency basis, including Charles, who resigned from Morgan as soon as we confirmed a position for him. Equipment was installed, tested, and calibrated in record time. Rebecca called late the next day as promised. We're in, she announced. Our board not only approved the strategic partnership, but wants to formalize a priority supply agreement with TM equipment. They found the synergy perfect for our expansion strategy. Excellent, I replied, feeling considerable relief. When can we announce? How about tomorrow? Rebecca suggested. Coincidentally, the same day as the Morgan board meeting. The mischievous tone in her voice made me smile. Rebecca always had an impeccable sense of timing. Perfect. The next morning, our lawyer hand-delivered the letter to the chairman of the Morgan board. Simultaneously, Corvix and TM Equipment issued a joint press release announcing our strategic partnership, highlighting how the collaboration would benefit the construction sector with innovative, integrated solutions. Thomas's phone rang less than 2 hours later. It was Paul, his son-in-law and current CEO of Morgan. What exactly are you doing, Thomas? His voice was tense, controlled, but with a clear note of accusation. Business, Paul, Thomas replied calmly. He had put the call on speakerphone so I could hear. Just as I've always done, with the employee we just fired. With our biggest competitor? This looks a lot like sabotage. Thomas sighed, a sound of exhausted patience. Paul, I'm going to say this once, and I hope you listen closely. Nicholas made a monumental strategic error by firing Liam. Instead of acknowledging that error, He's trying to turn it into a legal battle that will only hurt Morgan further. If the board follows that path, you will not only lose in court, but you will also destroy any chance of recovering the clients who have already left. There was a silence on the other end of the line. The board is meeting right now, Paul finally said. Nicholas is presenting his case to sue Liam and TM for business interference and misuse of confidential information. And what do you think about that? Thomas asked, his voice softening slightly. Another long silence. I think he's wrong, Paul admitted to my surprise. I think we should have valued Liam more. That this whole situation could have been avoided. Then tell the board that, Thomas urged. Be the leader I believed you could be when I handed the company to you. Stop this madness before it causes irreparable damage. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, Thomas interrupted, his voice firm again. Leadership is rarely comfortable, Paul. Sometimes it means confronting your own executives when they are wrong. The call ended shortly after, with no clear resolution. Thomas looked thoughtful as he hung up the phone. Paul was always a good administrator, but weak in confrontations, he commented. We'll see if he's found his spine after all these years. The next few hours were tense, filled with frantic work at the TM facility as we awaited news from the board meeting. Around 3 in the afternoon, Jenna received messages from her former colleagues at Morgan. Nicholas had stormed out of the boardroom, visibly furious, slamming doors. The official confirmation came at dusk. When Charles received a call from a friend still at Morgan, the board had voted against pursuing any legal action, citing uncertainties about the merit of the case and potential for further reputational damage. It seems Paul found his voice after all. Thomas observed when I shared the news. The immediate crisis had been averted, but we knew the war was just beginning. Nicholas would not accept defeat easily. In the following days, we began to hear about his new tactics: aggressive discounts for remaining clients, promises of accelerated delivery, attempts to discredit the quality of TM's products in conversations with potential customers. He's in panic mode, Thomas analyzed. Cutting margins he can't sustain, making promises he can't keep. What do? I asked. Nothing, Thomas replied, surprising me. Let him dig his own hole. We focus on delivering excellence, meeting deadlines, building solid relationships. The market isn't stupid, Liam. Temporary discounts are alluring, but reliability is what keeps clients long-term. His wisdom, as always, proved correct. In the following weeks, as TM Equipment formally established its operations and began delivering its first orders, we heard stories of clients disappointed with Morgan, missed deadlines, quality issues resulting from the rush, poor technical support due to staff cuts. A month after my firing, Patricia Wells organized a dinner to celebrate the successful start of our business relationship. In the elegant restaurant in River North, she raised her glass in a toast to TM Equipment, which in just 1 month has proven that business isn't done by companies, but by people. I looked around the table, Thomas beaming with the rebirth of his entrepreneurial spirit, Laura proud and supportive as ever, Henry James already planning to expand our contracts, Rebecca, our unexpected ally, Charles and Jenna, a core part of our new team. To valuing people, I replied, raising my own glass, and to the courage to start over when necessary. As we toasted to the promising future, I couldn't help but think about how one misguided decision by Nicholas had inadvertently created an opportunity I never would have otherwise considered. Sometimes what looks like an ending is just the beginning of something much bigger. What we didn't know that night of celebration was that Nicholas was far from finished. In fact, he was just beginning to plan his next move, one that none of us could have anticipated. 3 months had passed since the founding of TM Equipment. What began as a desperate response to my firing had blossomed into a solid, promising enterprise. Our warehouse in Gary was operating at full capacity, running 2 shifts to meet the growing demand. We had hired 43 employees, many of them former Morgan workers seeking stability after the continuous cuts implemented by Nicholas. The partnership with Corvix was thriving, creating integrated solutions that neither company could offer alone. Our reputation for personalized service and precise technical solutions was spreading quickly through the industry. One Wednesday morning, Thomas and I were meeting in our office, reviewing expansion plans for the next quarter, when Jenna entered with a worried expression. "Sorry to interrupt, But I think you need to see this. She placed a folder on the desk. It just arrived by courier. I opened the folder and found an official document, a notification from the IRS stating that TM equipment would be subject to a full tax audit, retroactive for the last 5 years of operation. 5 years? I questioned, confused. But we've only been operating for 3 months. Thomas took the document, his eyes narrowing as he read. This is no coincidence, he muttered. TM has existed on paper for 7 years, but it never had significant operations before you joined me. A retroactive audit would find nothing but zeroed-out declarations and a few minimal maintenance expenses. So what's the point? I asked. Intimidation, Thomas answered simply. And disruption. An IRS audit will require time, resources, and attention that we should be dedicating to growing the business. Jenna cleared her throat discreetly. There's one more thing. Maria from Morgan called me this morning. It seems they also received an audit notification yesterday. I exchanged a look with Thomas. The coincidence was too unlikely. Nicholas, we said in unison, but how? I questioned. He doesn't have influence at the IRS. Thomas leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Not directly. But do you remember Gregory Mitchell? That government client Morgan has been cultivating for years. The procurement director at the Department of Transportation, I recalled. A lucrative contract, and Nicholas's wife's second cousin Thomas completed. Fair connection that was always kept quiet, but was never a secret to those who know the backstory. The implication was clear and disturbing. Nicholas was using connections to create administrative obstacles, a tactic we couldn't fight directly. What do we do? I asked. We cooperate fully, Thomas replied without hesitation. Our books are in order, our taxes are paid. The audit will find nothing, but we'll have to endure the hassle. In the meantime, we can't let this distract us from our operations. In the following days, the audit began. As expected, it required constant attention from our small administrative team. Our accountant, Teresa, started working overtime to meet the documentation requests. Thomas and I had to postpone some client meetings to deal with interviews from the auditors. The pressure was exactly what Nicholas had hoped to create. But the shot backfired when the first results of Morgan's audit began to leak to the market. It seems there are significant discrepancies in their tax records from the last 2 years. Charles reported during our weekly team meeting. Coincidentally, since Nicholas took over financial direction. What kind of discrepancies? I asked. Mainly related to transactions with international suppliers, Charles explained. Rumors of over-invoicing, possible currency evasion. Nothing confirmed, but the market is already reacting. The matter was delicate. If Morgan was facing serious legal trouble, it could benefit TM in the short term, but it would also cast a shadow over the entire industry. Besides, many people we still respected worked there. Our audit, as predicted, found no irregularities. After 3 weeks of meticulous investigation, we received a clean report, with only minor recommendations on accounting procedures. A nuisance, but we're past it, Thomas commented as the last auditor left our facility. Nicholas will have to be more creative next time. Unfortunately, he was. A week later, we were informed that the city zoning department had received an anonymous tip about possible irregularities at our Gary facility. Another inspection, more lost time, more resources diverted from our growth. He's playing dirty, I commented to Laura that night, frustrated with the tactics. Using the system to harass us administratively. She listened patiently, as always, before offering her perspective. You know what this means, don't you? He's desperate. You're winning in the market, so he's trying to win behind the scenes. Her analysis was correct. Every week we received news of another client abandoning Morgan. Nicholas's aggressive discounts had eroded the company's margins to the point of compromising quality. His promises of accelerated delivery resulted in defective products and dissatisfied customers. The zoning inspection, like the tax audit, found no significant problems with our operations. Thomas had been meticulous when establishing TM equipment, ensuring all licenses and permits were impeccable. However, the backroom war was just beginning. One Friday morning, Rebecca from Corvix called me with worrying news. Liam, we just lost a major bid to Morgan, one we had practically guaranteed. How? Our proposal was technically superior, And more financially competitive, Rebecca explained, clearly irritated. But somehow Morgan got the contract even with higher prices and inferior specs. That doesn't make sense. It does if you know that the chairman of the bidding committee has a son who was just hired by Morgan at a salary well above the market rate, she revealed. An interesting coincidence, don't you think? The news was alarming, not just for the lost contract, but for what it signaled. Nicholas was willing to cross ethical lines in his crusade against us. The question was how far he would go. The answer came 2 weeks later, when I was approached in the TM parking lot by a man who identified himself as a reporter from the country's most influential business journal. Mr. Anderson, we're investigating allegations that TM Equipment was founded using privileged information from Morgan Industries, he began, recorder in hand. Any comment? I kept calm, limiting myself to informing him that all our operations were ethical and legal, and that any suggestion to the contrary was baseless. I suggested he contact our legal department for further questions. As soon as he left, I called Thomas. Nicholas is talking to the press now, I informed him, trying to defame us publicly. It was a matter of time, Thomas replied, surprisingly calm, but we have our own story to tell. The next day, Thomas invited a respected journalist from a competing publication for a guided tour of our facilities. He showed our production, introduced our team, explained our business vision centered on relationships and quality. Without ever directly mentioning Morgan or Nicholas, he told the story of how TM was born from valuing people and lasting relationships in a market that increasingly prioritized only numbers. The resulting report was published 3 days later. A detailed, complimentary profile of TM Equipment as an example of American entrepreneurship, innovation, and valuing human capital. The implicit contrast with Morgan's tactics was clear to any informed reader. The article circulated widely in the industry, reinforcing our positive reputation. Nicholas's attempt at defamation had turned into positive publicity for us. But the real bombshell exploded a week later when we received an unexpected call from Paul, Thomas's son-in-law and CEO of Morgan. We need to talk, he said without preamble. In person. Not at your offices or at Morgan's. We agreed to meet at a discreet restaurant in Lincoln Park. Thomas and I arrived first, apprehensive about what Paul might want. When he entered, I immediately noticed how worn down he looked. Deep dark circles, tense posture, and anxious gaze. Thank you for coming, he said, sitting down. He ordered a double whiskey before we even started talking, an unusual sign for a normally moderate man. What can we do for you, Paul? Thomas asked, direct as always. Paul took a long sip of his drink before answering. I'm here to warn you, and maybe to ask for help. Warn us about what? I questioned. Nicholas has gone crazy, Paul declared, lowering his voice. His obsession with you has surpassed all rationality. He's willing to do anything to destroy TM, even if it destroys Morgan in the process. That's not new, Thomas commented. We've seen his tactics. No, you've only seen the surface, Paul insisted. He hesitated, looking around nervously. He forged internal documents to justify questionable decisions. He manipulated financial reports to hide the real impact of client losses. And now, Paul stopped again, seemingly struggling with what he was about to reveal. And now? Thomas pressed. And now he's proposing a hostile takeover of TM to the board. He plans to use capital from foreign investors to make an offer for your assets, an offer that will look generous on the surface. If you refuse, he plans to start a price war that neither company will survive, with the difference that Morgan has the reserves to last longer. The revelation left us stunned. The idea that Nicholas would sacrifice Morgan itself in his personal revenge was almost unbelievable. Almost. Why are you telling us this? I asked Paul. He finished his drink before answering. Because Morgan was built by my father-in-law, he said, looking at Thomas. It was entrusted to me to preserve and expand, not to be used as a weapon in a personal vendetta. And because, his voice cracked slightly, I discovered that Nicholas has records of my signature on documents I never even saw. If this all falls apart, he has a way to shift the blame to me. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Thomas spoke. What exactly do you want from us, Paul? Help to stop him before it's too late, Paul replied. To save Morgan and myself. As we considered his words, my phone vibrated with a message. It was Jenna. Urgent. Just heard Morgan is preparing a formal offer for TM equipment. The document leaks to the press tomorrow. I showed the message to Thomas, whose expression remained unchanged as he turned to Paul. It seems we have less time than we thought. Tell us everything you know about Nicholas's plans. Every detail. Paul spoke for nearly 2 hours, revealing increasingly alarming details about Nicholas's actions over the past few months. The situation was worse than we had imagined. He forged financial projections for the board, Paul explained, his voice low and tense. He minimized the loss of revenue, exaggerated the recovery prospects. When the real numbers started to surface, he blamed the accounting team for methodological errors, and the board believed him. Thomas questioned, incredulous. Paul sighed deeply. At first, yes, Nicholas was always persuasive, and most of the board members don't understand the operational details of the business. But in recent weeks, the discrepancies became too large to ignore, and that's when he decided to bet everything on acquiring us, I concluded. Exactly, Paul confirmed. He presented the idea as a brilliant solution. Absorb the competitor that was stealing Morgan's clients, eliminate the threat, recover the lost relationships, all in a single move. With what money? Thomas asked, always practical. Morgan doesn't have the available capital for an acquisition of this size, especially with the recent losses. That's where the bigger problem lies. Paul looked around nervously before continuing. He found foreign investors willing to finance the operation in exchange for a significant stake in the merged company. What the board doesn't know is that these are investors with whom he has previous personal relationships, and the financing conditions are predatory, to say the least. I took a sip of water, absorbing the gravity of the situation. In other words, he's selling off Morgan to finance his revenge against us. Paul nodded gravely. If you refuse the public offer, phase 2 of the plan is a brutal price war. The investors have agreed to finance operations at a loss for up to 18 months, long enough to force TM into bankruptcy. Then they would take control of Morgan for restructuring. And you would be the scapegoat, Thomas completed, looking at his son-in-law with a mix of compassion and disappointment. Why did it take you so long to act, Paul? Fear, he admitted bluntly. Fear of confronting him, of admitting I made a mistake by giving him so much power. And shame in coming to you, he added, looking at Thomas. Of admitting that I failed the company you entrusted to me. Thomas remained silent for a few moments, his face an impenetrable mask. And what do you propose now? He finally asked. A coordinated counter-offensive, Paul replied, regaining some composure. I have access to all the internal documents, including those Nicholas believes he hid or destroyed. Evidence of financial manipulation, of decisions made without proper approval, of undeclared conflicts of interest with these investors. You're proposing to expose your own COO, I observed. The consequences for Morgan would be devastating. They already are devastating, Paul retorted. The question now is whether we can salvage anything from the wreckage. The plan we formulated that night was risky, but necessary. Paul would return to Morgan and discreetly gather all the incriminating documentation against Nicholas. Thomas would activate his contacts on the board, preparing them for what was to come. Meanwhile, I would coordinate with Rebecca from Corvix on a strategy to protect our mutual interests. One last thing, Paul added before we parted. Nicholas plans to announce the hostile offer at a press conference on Monday. You have 4 days to prepare. The following weekend was a marathon of preparations. Our legal team worked non-stop, analyzing documents and preparing our legal defense. Thomas spent hours on the phone with old colleagues and trusted contacts, weaving an invisible support network. On Sunday night, Paul sent us an encrypted message with a link to a secure server. There we found a treasure trove of evidence, emails, internal memos, doctored financial records, all carefully indexed and annotated. This is more than enough. Our lawyer, Camilla Evans, commented after reviewing the documents. We have grounds not only to block any hostile acquisition attempt, but to initiate actions for fraud and financial manipulation. But something still bothered me. I don't want to destroy Morgan. I confessed to Thomas when we were alone in his study in the early hours of Monday morning. There are dozens of good people working there, people who have nothing to do with Nicholas's machinations. Thomas nodded, his tired eyes reflecting the same concern. I agree. Our fight isn't with the company, but with a man who hijacked it for his own ends. The challenge is to separate one from the other. That's when an idea began to form in my mind. A solution that could solve multiple problems at once. What if, instead of just defending ourselves, we counterattacked? I suggested. Not against Morgan, but for it. Explain, Thomas asked, leaning forward with renewed interest. What if we made our own offer? Not to buy Morgan, but to propose a genuine merger, a combination of the companies under new leadership, preserving jobs, recovering the original vision you had for the business. A light sparked in Thomas's eyes, that familiar spark of strategic vision I had witnessed so many times in the years we worked together. A bold move, he murmured. We would need the board's support, which you are already cultivating, I completed. And with the evidence Paul provided, Nicholas would be neutralized. We would also need capital Corvix, I suggested. Rebecca mentioned they were considering expansion. This would be a perfect opportunity for them to acquire a stake in a larger, combined entity without the risks of building from scratch. Thomas stood up, walking slowly around the study as the idea took shape in his mind. It wouldn't be a traditional merger, he thought aloud, more of a restructuring. Morgan would absorb TM, keeping the established name and brand, but with new management and philosophy. The current investors would be diluted, but not eliminated. They would receive fair value. And most importantly, I added, the clients would see continuity, not disruption. The jobs would be preserved. We worked for the rest of the early morning, refining the plan, running numbers, preparing our proposal. At 6 a.m. I called Rebecca, dragging her from sleep for an emergency video conference. After the initial shock, she grasped the vision quickly. Audacious was her first reaction, but brilliant. I'm waking up my board right now. The press conference called by Nicholas was scheduled for 2 p.m. Our team worked frantically to finalize our counter-proposal by noon. Paul sent us a message confirming he was ready for his part. At 1:30 p.m., as journalists began to gather in the Morgan auditorium, Thomas, myself, Rebecca, and our legal team entered through a side door, guided discreetly by Paul to the boardroom. The board members were already assembled, preparing for Nicholas's presentation. The surprise on their faces when we entered was quickly replaced by curiosity as Thomas took the floor. Gentlemen, I apologize for the intrusion, but what we are about to present cannot wait, he began, his voice carrying that natural authority he had built Morgan with decades before. Before you make any decisions based on what Nicholas will soon present, it is imperative that you know all the facts. For the next 20 minutes, we presented the evidence Paul had gathered, manipulated financial statements, unauthorized decisions, the conflict of interest with the foreign investors. The board members' faces went from disbelief to anger as the extent of Nicholas's betrayal became clear. This is disturbing, to say the least, the chairman of the board finally declared, a respected banker who had supported Thomas for decades. But why are you bringing this to us? What is your interest beyond stopping the hostile offer? It was my cue. I stepped forward, presenting our alternative proposal, a true respectful merger that would preserve Morgan's legacy while incorporating TM's innovation and agility. A rescue, not a takeover. With the financial and strategic support of Corvix, I added, motioning to Rebecca, we can stabilize operations immediately and begin recovering lost clients. Our projections indicate a return to profitability in 6 months and sustainable growth thereafter. The silence that followed was deafening. The board members exchanged glances, some clearly tempted, others skeptical. Finally, the chairman spoke again. This is an unexpected proposal that we need to consider carefully. In the meantime, we have a press conference in. He checked his watch, 10 minutes. What do you suggest we do? Paul stepped forward. Gentlemen of the board, as current CEO, I formally request the suspension of the press conference until we can fully evaluate this new information. And I strongly recommend the temporary suspension of Nicholas pending an internal investigation. More exchanged glances among the board members. A few whispers. Then a nod from the chairman. Approved. Paul, please cancel the press conference and summon Nicholas for an immediate meeting here. Gentlemen, he addressed us. Thank you for your frankness and courage. We will need a few hours to deliberate on your proposal. As we left the boardroom, Paul escorted us to a private office to await the outcome. He's going to fight, Paul commented. clearly nervous. "Nicholas is not a man to accept defeat easily." "Let him fight," Thomas replied serenely. "The truth is on our side now." What followed was like a scene from a dramatic movie. From the office where we waited, we could hear Nicholas's raised voice echoing down the hall when he was informed of the press conference's cancellation. Minutes later, he was escorted into the boardroom. More raised voices followed by a tense silence. After what felt like an eternity, the door to our office opened. It was the board chairman, accompanied by 2 other members. "The situation is more serious than we imagined," he informed us without preamble. When confronted, Nicholas tried to deny everything, then blamed subordinates. When we presented the concrete evidence, he lost control. He threatened lawsuits, retaliation. It was necessary to call security to escort him out. I took a deep breath, processing the information. "And what about our proposal?" "We will need more time for a full analysis, naturally," the chairman replied. "But speaking personally, I believe it represents our best chance to save what Thomas built. The board is inclined to proceed with formal negotiations." The following weeks were intense, with teams from both sides working tirelessly to structure the merger. Nicholas, as expected, initiated lawsuits against everyone involved, but his position weakened dramatically when the IRS, tipped off by the discrepancies we had uncovered, began its own investigation. Ironically, the audit he had instigated against us now turned against him with full force. 2 months after that dramatic night, we were ready to publicly announce the merger. The press conference. This time, legitimate gathered industry journalists at a hotel in downtown Chicago. Paul opened the session, explaining the vision for the new combined company, which would retain the Morgan name for its historical value, but incorporate the relationship-centered philosophy that had made TM so successful in such a short time. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the audience of attentive faces, journalists, anxious employees from both companies, clients, and partners, and felt the weight of the moment. "This is not a story of an acquisition or one company's victory over another," I began. "It is a story of a return to the fundamental values that should have always guided our industry. Genuine human relationships, trust built over time, a commitment to quality that transcends fiscal quarters." I paused briefly, meeting Thomas's gaze in the front row, the pride evident in his eyes. 4 months ago, when I was fired from Morgan, I thought it was the end of a journey. Today I understand it was just the beginning of something much bigger. Sometimes we need to lose something valuable to discover what truly matters. And what matters in the end are not profit margins or operational efficiencies alone, but the people. The people who make up our teams, those who trust us as suppliers, those who depend on the products we create. The room was in absolute silence, every word absorbed with intensity. The new Morgan will be a company for people, led by people who understand the value of every handshake, every promise kept, every relationship built with patience and integrity. As I concluded my speech, I realized the story had come full circle. What began with harsh words in a corporate office, "You are an expensive burden to this company," now ended with a celebration of the true value of people. Nicholas had tried to reduce me to a number on a spreadsheet, but he had inadvertently unleashed something far more powerful. The determination to build a business that would never forget that behind every transaction, there are human beings seeking trust, respect, and genuine partnership. The merger would be just the beginning of a new journey, with its own challenges and lessons. But one thing was certain: we would never again allow spreadsheets and cold metrics to overshadow what truly builds lasting companies. The human connections that no algorithm or efficiency strategy could ever replace. The 6 months that followed the merger were a roller coaster of challenges and victories, integrating 2 corporate cultures, harmonizing production processes, reorganizing teams. Every aspect required careful attention and many long hours. As the new Chief Operating Officer of the renewed Morgan, I often found myself in the production warehouses late at night, working side by side with engineers and technicians to ensure a smooth transition. Paul remained as CEO, but with a transformed approach, more participatory and less isolated. Thomas, officially a strategic consultant, was in truth the beating heart of the reborn company. his enthusiasm infecting everyone from the board to the factory floor. One Thursday afternoon, as we reviewed the results of the first post-merger semester in my office, Thomas smiled with satisfaction as he analyzed the numbers. "We've exceeded projections by 12%, he observed, adjusting his reading glasses. "And we've recovered 78% of the clients who left during the Nicholas era." "Product quality helped," I replied, "but it was the relationships that made the difference. When we resumed personal contact, listened to their real needs, most were ready to come back." Thomas nodded, leaning back in his chair. "You know what gives me the most satisfaction, Liam? Seeing how the employees are now. That tension, that fear that hung in the hallways is gone. People are smiling again, collaborating genuinely." It was true. The cultural transformation was perhaps the most significant result of our intervention. Where there were once departmental silos and oppressive metrics, there was now collaboration and a shared purpose. We replaced constant monitoring with trust and responsibility. We eliminated redundant reports and unnecessary bureaucracy that stifled innovation. "Speaking of which," I continued, checking my watch, "it's time for our monthly all-hands meeting. Shall we?" The company auditorium was full when we arrived. Old Morgan employees mixed with those who came from TM. New hires attracted by our growing reputation for organizational culture. Paul was already on stage preparing the presentation. Our tradition of total transparency, openly sharing results, challenges and future plans with all employees was one of the most appreciated changes. Under Nicholas's management, information was compartmentalized. Knowledge was power to be hoarded. Now we understood that shared knowledge was multiplied power. "Before we start with the numbers," Paul began after the greetings, "I want to share some important news." Officially, the lawsuit filed by Nicholas against our company was dismissed by the court yesterday. The judge deemed the allegations baseless and ordered him to pay our legal costs. A wave of spontaneous applause rippled through the auditorium. The ghost of Nicholas, which had hovered over us for months with legal threats and defamation attempts, finally dissipated. "This closes the last chapter of that turbulent period," Paul continued. "Now we can focus completely on the future, without distractions." The meeting proceeded with updates from each department, open discussions about pending challenges, and celebration of collective achievements. I watched the active participation of employees from all levels, offering ideas, asking tough questions, demonstrating genuine ownership of the company's shared destiny. After the meeting, I was approached by Jenna, who had become our customer experience manager, an entirely new department created to institutionalize the focus on relationships. "Liam, we just received an interesting request from Horizon Engineering," she informed me. "Referring to a large potential client we had been courting for months. They want a full tour of our facilities before closing the contract. Apparently they've heard so much about our revolutionary culture that they want to see it for themselves. Schedule it for next week," I instructed, "and make sure they see everything, not just the polished showroom we normally show. I want them to see the real factory, talk to real employees. Isn't that risky?" Jenna asked, hesitant. "What if they find a problem or a process that isn't optimized yet?" I smiled at her concern. "That's exactly the point, Jenna. We're not selling perfection. We're selling authenticity. If they see a problem, they'll also see how we're solving it openly as a team. That says more about who we are than any rehearsed presentation." She nodded, understanding the philosophy we had built. The visit from Horizon Engineering the following week proved to be a turning point. Their director of operations, impressed by what he witnessed, not only signed the largest supply contract in our company's history, but also requested workshops for his own team on our people-centric management methodology. "You're not just manufacturing equipment," he commented during the closing lunch. "You're redefining how a traditional industry can operate in the 21st century without losing its soul in the process." His observation precisely captured our ambition. We were proving that efficiency and humanity were not mutually exclusive. On the contrary, true sustainable efficiency could only arise when people felt valued, engaged, and aligned with a greater purpose. Success attracted attention. Trade magazines requested interviews, business schools invited us for lectures, other companies in the sector began to implement aspects of our approach. The same media Nicholas had tried to manipulate against us now featured us as a case study of successful organizational transformation. One afternoon, Rebecca from Corvix, now our strategic partner and minority investor, visited me for a quarterly update. "You've created a monster. You know," she commented with a smile, sitting in my office, "in a good way. More and more clients are asking us if we've adopted the Morgan model in our operations." "And have you?" I asked, curious. "We're implementing it gradually," she admitted. "It's not easy to change decades of traditional corporate culture. But the initial results are promising. Our employee turnover has dropped 23% in the departments that adopted your transparent management practices." The conversation shifted to our joint plans for the future. New products, new markets, potential international expansions. The partnership with Corvix had proven mutually beneficial, providing them access to our customer relationship expertise and us resources for accelerated expansion. When Rebecca left, I found Thomas in the internal garden we had created, where an underused parking lot used to be, a space where employees could relax, exchange ideas informally, or simply reconnect with nature during breaks. "You look satisfied," he observed, indicating the bench beside him. "I am," I confirmed, sitting down. "I just realized it's been exactly 1 year since Nicholas called me into his office to fire me." Thomas smiled, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of his 73 years. Life has a remarkable sense of irony, don't you think? That moment, which seemed like a personal tragedy, ended up being the catalyst for something far greater than any of us could have imagined. "Did you suspect it?" I asked. "When you approached me with the TM proposal, did you already envision this outcome?" He contemplated the question for a moment. "Not this specific outcome," he answered honestly, "but I always believed that good people, working with solid principles, would eventually triumph over cold, calculating approaches. What I didn't foresee was the speed and magnitude of the transformation." A group of engineers walked through the garden, engaged in a lively discussion about some technical innovation. They nodded respectfully to us without interrupting their creative flow. "You know what makes me happiest?" I continued after watching them. "Seeing people like Charles, Maria, Jenna, all those who suffered under the previous management, now flourishing, taking creative risks, proposing bold ideas, feeling ownership of their work. True leadership is about that," Thomas commented. "Not controlling people, but unlocking their potential." Nicholas never understood that. My phone vibrated with a notification. It was Laura, letting me know she would arrive soon for the evening's event, a celebration for employees' families, another tradition we had resurrected from the old Morgan, before Nicholas's unnecessary expense cuts. "Time to get ready for the party," I commented, standing up. "Are you coming?" Thomas nodded, accepting my hand to help him up. I wouldn't miss it for the world. These moments when we see the families behind our collaborators are what truly matter. They remind us why we do what we do. The event that night was a celebration not just of business results, but of renewed human connections. The large warehouse, transformed with festive decorations, was filled with employees and their families. Children ran between tables, couples danced to the live band, diverse groups chatted animatedly, sharing stories and laughter. Paul gave a brief welcome speech, followed by Thomas, whose patriarchal presence always inspired respect and affection. When my turn came, I stepped onto the small makeshift stage and looked out at the sea of familiar and new faces. 1 year ago, I began without prepared notes, just speaking from the heart. Someone told me I was an expensive burden to the company, that personal relationships were obsolete in the modern business world. That efficiency meant eliminating the human factor from corporate equations. I paused, letting the words resonate. Today, looking at all of you, at what we've built together, at the records we've broken and the lives we've transformed, I see living proof of the opposite. There is no human factor as something separable from business. Business is human. It is relationships. It is trust built patiently, word by word, action by action, over time. My eyes met Laura's in the crowd, her expression radiant with pride. When we value people as complete individuals, I continued, not just as functions or costs on a spreadsheet, we discover an inexhaustible source of innovation, loyalty, and shared purpose. That's what we celebrate today. Not just the impressive numbers from the last year, but the community we are rebuilding. A community where one person's success is everyone's success. The ovation that followed was warm and genuine. Amid the applause, I noticed many teary eyes, not just from momentary emotion, but from deep recognition. Everyone in that room had experienced the difference between being treated as a disposable resource and being valued as an essential collaborator in a shared vision. Later, as the party continued lively, I found a moment to chat with Henry James of Pinnacle Construction, one of the first clients to support our venture when it all began. "You've created something extraordinary here, Liam," he commented, observing the celebration around us. "Something that goes far beyond manufacturing good equipment. We created it," I corrected gently. "Without clients like you believing in us from the very beginning, none of this would be possible." Henry smiled, raising his glass in a silent toast. "Do you know what happened to Nicholas?" he asked after a moment. "I've heard rumors, but nothing concrete. From what I know, he's working as an independent consultant in another city," I replied. "I hold no grudges. In a way, I owe him a paradoxical thank you. His misguided decision opened doors I never would have considered otherwise." "Magnanimous of you," Henry observed, "but also very you. You were always able to see the bigger picture, beyond the petty vengeances that consume most people." The observation touched me. It was true that despite all the conflict, I had never felt a genuine desire for retaliation against Nicholas. My focus had always been on building, not destroying. As the night wore on, I found a moment to stand alone in a quiet corner, watching the celebration in full swing. I saw Charles, now our sales director, excitedly explaining something to a group of clients. Maria, promoted to strategic projects manager, laughing with her team. Jenna, discreetly coordinating the event details with her characteristic efficiency. Thomas approached, accompanied by Paul, both with contemplative expressions. "Thinking deeply?" Thomas asked. "Just appreciating the moment," I replied, "and reflecting on how we got here." "It was quite a journey," Paul commented, a humility in his voice that would have been unthinkable a year before. "With more ups and downs than any business plan could predict. The best part," Thomas added, "is that this is just the beginning. What we've built here has the potential to influence not only our industry, but the way companies in general view the balance between people and results." He was right, of course. What we had created transcended financial metrics or market share. It was a living, constantly evolving model of how organizations could thrive economically while also promoting dignity, purpose, and personal growth. I watched Laura chatting animatedly with the spouses of other executives, building her own network of relationships. Our children, Megan and Julian, had brought friends from college to see the amazing company their parents were building. Even the suppliers and partners present seemed like more than just business contacts. They were participants in a larger community. "Maybe this is what companies were always supposed to be," I commented almost to myself. "Not profit-generating machines, but communities with a shared purpose." "Exactly," Thomas confirmed, a gleam of satisfaction in his experienced eyes. "And now that we've rediscovered this fundamental truth, it's up to us to ensure it's never forgotten again." As the music played and the celebration continued around us, I felt a deep certainty that, regardless of future challenges, we had found a reliable compass to navigate them. A compass that always pointed to the irreplaceable value of genuine human connections in a world increasingly obsessed with algorithms, automation, and cold metrics. Nicholas had tried to reduce me to a number on a spreadsheet. Inadvertently, he had freed me to rediscover and amplify the truth I had always known in my heart. That the best businesses, like the best lives, are built relationship by relationship, trust by trust, moment by moment. 5 years had passed since that first meeting with Thomas in my living room, when TM equipment was just a nascent idea, a desperate response to a seemingly hopeless situation. On a sunny Friday morning, I parked my car in the same spot as always, in the vast Morgan parking lot. Now officially Morgan Integrated Solutions after our latest brand update. The industrial complex had tripled in size, with 3 new warehouses built to accommodate expanded production lines and our innovative research and development center. As I walked to my office, I greeted dozens of employees by name. Some were veterans who had survived the Nicholas era, others who came with the TM merger, many newly hired, attracted by the company's reputation as a leader, not only in industrial technology, but in humanized organizational culture. Jenna, now Director of Experience and Relationships, intercepted me in the hallway with her tablet in hand. "Good morning, Liam. The final details for today's event are confirmed. The governor has confirmed attendance as well as the mayor and 3 state secretaries." "Excellent," I replied. "And the special guest of honor?" A knowing smile lit up her face. "He suspects nothing. He fully believes he's only coming for the official inauguration of the new training center." "Perfect. Keep it a secret until the last moment." The he in question was Thomas Morgan, who would turn 78 that day. The inauguration of the Thomas Morgan Training Center, a 50,000 square foot space dedicated to technical training and human development, was real. But we had planned an additional surprise for the founder, who had not only built the original company, but had been instrumental in its renaissance. My morning was filled with preparatory meetings for the big event. At noon, Paul, still CEO and now a transformed leader, respected for his integrity and balanced vision, joined me for a quick lunch. "I still can't believe we managed to keep the award a secret," he commented, checking messages on his phone. "Especially since the National Association of Industry usually announces the Lifetime Achievement Award weeks in advance." "The advantages of good relationships," I replied with a smile. The association's president is an old friend of Thomas's. When I explained our surprise idea, he immediately agreed to alter the protocol. Paul nodded, a contemplative expression on his face. "You know, 6 years ago I would have considered that kind of relationship as something antiquated, almost irrelevant in the modern business world. And now? Now I understand it's the fundamental fabric that holds everything together," he answered sincerely. "Metrics, processes, technology, all important, but secondary to genuine human connections." His personal transformation was perhaps the most eloquent example of the cultural change we had implemented. From a distant executive who delegated difficult decisions to subordinates like Nicholas, Paul had become a present, reflective leader who understood that numbers on spreadsheets represented real human lives. At 3 in the afternoon, the large outdoor space where the ceremony would be held, was already prepared. Chairs arranged for 500 guests, a stage decorated with the company's colors, banners highlighting Morgan's history from its founding by Thomas to its current position as an industry leader. The press began to arrive, along with dignitaries and business partners. Rebecca from Corvix, now our strategic partner after a partial merger that had strengthened both companies, approached as I supervised the final preparations. "Nervous?" she asked with a knowing smile. "A little," I admitted. Not about the ceremony itself, but about the emotion of the moment. Thomas deserves this recognition more than anyone. I hope we do him justice. "You are," she assured. "His legacy is alive not just in this industrial complex, but in how you've transformed the way of doing business. Other companies are following your example, you know. The Morgan approach has become a case study in business schools." It was true. Our journey had transcended the company's own borders, inspiring a broader re-evaluation of how organizations could operate efficiently without sacrificing humanity. We regularly spoke at conferences, received technical visits from business owners across the country, and had even published a book documenting our transformation. The crowd began to form. I spotted Henry James and Patricia Wells, our first supporters, arriving together. Charles, now Vice President of Sales, coordinated a team guiding the VIP guests. Maria circulated among groups of foreign visitors, explaining the company's principles in fluent English. Employees from all levels participated in the organization, demonstrating the sense of collective ownership we had cultivated. At 4 o'clock sharp, the official car arrived carrying Thomas, accompanied by his wife Regina. Despite his advanced age, he still maintained the upright posture and piercing gaze that characterized him. His smile when he saw the magnitude of the event warmed my heart. "You've overdone it," he commented as he hugged me. "A simple ribbon cutting would have been enough." "Nothing is overdone when it comes to honoring your legacy, Thomas," I replied sincerely. The ceremony began punctually. The governor gave a speech on Morgan's importance to the state's economy, highlighting the jobs created and the international reputation earned. The mayor emphasized our commitment to the local community through social and environmental programs. When my turn to speak came, I looked at the sea of attentive faces and felt the weight of the historic moment. A little over 5 years ago, I was called into an executive's office who informed me that I was an expensive burden to the company, that my approach of building personal relationships was obsolete, that 3 interns could do my job for a fraction of the cost. I paused, noting a few knowing smiles among those who knew our story. That day, which seemed like the worst of my career, proved to be the most transformative, because it forced me to question fundamental assumptions about value, purpose, and success in business. And it led me to reconnect with a mentor who had shaped my professional vision from the beginning, Thomas Morgan. I motioned to where Thomas was seated in the front row, sparking a wave of applause. What we have built together since then is not just a larger or more profitable company, but a business model that proves efficiency and humanity are not competing objectives, but complementary ones. That long-term sustainable profit is only possible when people, employees, clients, suppliers, communities are genuinely valued, not as resources to be optimized, but as partners in a shared journey. I detailed some of the milestones of our trajectory: the creation of TM Equipment as a response to my firing, the merger that saved Morgan from self-destruction under Nicholas's toxic leadership, the expansion that had made us industry leaders not only in market share but in innovation and customer satisfaction. Today, as we inaugurate the training center that bears our founder's name, we celebrate not just a new physical space, but a continued commitment to human development as the engine of all organizational progress. It was then that we reached the surprise moment. I called the president of the National Association of Industry to the stage, who revealed the hidden trophy and announced, "It is with immense honor that I present the 2030 Lifetime Achievement Award to Thomas Morgan, whose pioneering vision, extraordinary resilience, and unwavering values have transformed not only his company, but inspired an entire generation of business leaders to rediscover the value of people in business." The ovation was deafening. Thomas, visibly emotional, a rare sight for a man usually so composed, was guided to the stage where he received the award with slightly trembling hands. When he reached the microphone, the crowd silenced in respect. "This recognition," he began, his voice firm despite the visible emotion, "belongs not to me, but to every person who believed that business can and must be conducted with integrity, long-term vision, and fundamental respect for human dignity." He briefly recounted his journey from the founding of the original company to the recent challenges and the renaissance under new leadership. "When I founded Morgan almost 50 years ago, many told me my approach was antiquated, that personal relationships and handshakes were relics of a bygone era, that the future belonged to cold, calculating managers who saw people as numbers on spreadsheets." A slight smile touched his lips. 5 decades later, after watching countless management fads come and go, one truth remains constant. Organizations are fundamentally human communities united by a shared purpose. When we forget this, as we nearly did under previous leadership, we lose not only our soul but ultimately our economic viability. He looked directly at me, a silent thank you in his eyes. I was fortunate to find in Liam Anderson someone who not only shared this vision, but had the courage to defend it when all seemed lost. Together, with the support of hundreds of equally committed people, we proved that the future of business lies not in dehumanization, but in rehumanization. Thomas's words deeply touched the audience. Many executives present, including some who had openly mocked our approach years before, now nodded in agreement. The corporate world was changing, slowly but perceptibly, and we were proud to be part of that movement. After the formal ceremony, the celebration continued with a cocktail reception in the company gardens. I circulated among the groups, chatting with dignitaries, clients, employees, and their families. Each interaction reinforced how far we had progressed since the dark days of Nicholas's regime. In a quiet moment, I found Nicholas in a secluded corner, his gaze lost in the distance, perhaps contemplating the path that had brought us here. "Still thinking about the day you fired me?" I asked gently, He turned, surprised by my direct approach. Actually, yes, he admitted, an unusual vulnerability in his expression. I used to think of that day as when I lost my battle against you. Now I realize it was the day I lost the battle against myself. His words caught me off guard. In the years after his tempestuous exit from Morgan, Nicholas had gone through hard times. His tarnished reputation made it difficult to find executive positions, and according to rumors, he had faced a deep personal crisis. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I spent my whole life believing business was about numbers, efficiency, measurable results," he explained, a new humility in his voice. I internally ridiculed what I called the sentimental approach of people like you and Thomas. "When I fired you, I was convinced I was modernizing an antiquated company." He paused, taking a sip of his mineral water. "Now seeing what you've built, I understand what I could never see, that efficiency without purpose is empty, that metrics without human meaning are just arbitrary symbols, that genuine relationships aren't an old-fashioned luxury, but the foundation of any truly sustainable enterprise." His confession, so different from the arrogant, calculating Nicholas I had known, moved me. "It's never too late to start over, Nicholas," I offered sincerely. "What you've learned, however painful, is valuable." Perhaps he agreed with a small smile. "I've started giving lectures to young executives about the dangers of spreadsheet leadership, as I call it now. About how I lost a promising company by confusing control with leadership. It's not the career I imagined, but it has its purpose." As we parted with a hesitant but genuine handshake, I realized that even Nicholas, the antagonist of our story, had found a way to turn failure into meaningful learning. Later that evening, when most of the guests had left, I found myself on the terrace of the new administrative building with Thomas, Paul, Laura, and a small group of people who had been fundamental to our journey. The city glittered in the distance, and the industrial complex below us, strategically illuminated, looked like a small, pulsating city. "What's next?" Henry James asked, raising his glass in an informal toast. "You've already revolutionized an entire industry. What else is left to conquer?" It was a pertinent question. We had surpassed every goal we set after the merger. Our national market share was dominant, and we were beginning to expand internationally. Our reputation as an employer of choice attracted the best talent. Our customer satisfaction ratings were unparalleled. I looked at Thomas, who smiled and motioned for me to answer. "The next chapter," I began thoughtfully, "isn't about conquest, but about multiplication. About using our platform to elevate other organizations, other communities. About demonstrating that capitalism can be a force for good when centered on fundamental human values." I explained our newly developed vision to transform the training center not just into a space for technical development, but into an incubator for new companies founded on similar principles, to create a foundation to support social entrepreneurs, to establish educational exchanges with underserved communities. In short, I concluded, our next challenge is to ensure that what we've discovered here doesn't remain confined within these walls, but spreads like a positive wave through our society. "Ambitious," Rebecca commented with approval, "but if anyone can do it, it's you. Corvix is ready to support this expanded vision." The conversation flowed naturally to the practical details of implementation, each person adding valuable ideas and perspectives. Watching that extraordinary group of people, former competitors, now partners, former subordinates, now leaders in their own right, mentors and learners interacting as equals, I felt a deep gratitude for the path that had brought us here. As the night drew on and the group began to disperse, I found a moment to stand alone with Thomas on the terrace. The old businessman, despite the obvious fatigue after an emotionally intense day, radiated a serene satisfaction. "You know what makes me proudest, Liam?" he asked, contemplating the illuminated skyline. "Not the buildings, not the profits, not even the award. It's seeing how the seed we planted continues to grow in ways we could never have predicted." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "When I started at Morgan, you taught me that we sold solutions, not products," I recalled. "That our true offer wasn't industrial equipment, but reliability, partnership, peace of mind. And you learned well," he smiled. "So well that, when tested to the extreme, you not only preserved that philosophy, but expanded it beyond what I could have imagined." A cleaning staff member passed by, greeting us by name with genuine warmth. Another small example of the culture we had cultivated, where every person, regardless of role, was seen and valued. If Nicholas could go back in time, I asked, more out of philosophical curiosity than practical, what do you think he would do differently? Thomas considered the question seriously. Maybe nothing, he answered finally. Because that's who he was at that moment, shaped by an educational and corporate system that rewarded certain behaviors and dismissed others as signs of weakness. He needed to lose everything to begin questioning that conditioning. Like all of us, in a way, I reflected. My firing was a necessary awakening. It showed me I had normalized toxic dynamics for too long, trying to preserve something that was already fundamentally compromised. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder, a fatherly gesture that had become common between us. The difference, my boy, is that you had the courage to choose a different path when the opportunity arose. To build instead of destroy, to unite instead of divide, and that choice, multiplied by hundreds of similar decisions by equally courageous people, is what brought us here. As the night sky embraced the city and our industrial complex shone like a beacon of possibility, I reflected on how one simple sentence, "You are an expensive burden to this company," had inadvertently triggered a transformation that transcended business, touching lives in ways that would continue to reverberate for generations. The true value of a person, of an idea, of a company, could never be captured on a spreadsheet. It was in the invisible but unbreakable connections between people united by a shared purpose. In the relationships built patiently over time, in the courage to defend principles when all seems lost. That was the lesson Nicholas could never learn in time, the lesson we now shared with a corporate world increasingly receptive to a more humane and sustainable vision of success. A lesson that we hoped would help shape a future where business served humanity, not the other way around. As Thomas and I went down together to join our waiting families, I carried with me the certainty that our story, with all its twists, challenges, and unexpected triumphs, was just one chapter in a much larger narrative about rediscovering what truly matters in business and in life. A narrative that would continue long after us, inspiring others to find the courage to build organizations that honor humanity at their core, even when short-term pressures seem to point in the opposite direction. And that, more than any traditional metric of success, was a legacy we could truly be proud of. End of story, dear listeners. We hope the story of Liam and Thomas touched your hearts. To continue this exciting journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and human relationships. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to seeing you in the comments.